Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
And the Iranians managed to somehow build their abilities, get the very special machines you have to keep in order to produce ballistic precise missiles. And right now, they're actually manufacturing the ballistic missiles in a very close pace to what they were able to do before.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with U.S. President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago later this month. The encounter could be an urgent one for the Israeli premier. Israel's military intelligence chief, Major General Shlomi Binder, briefed U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Mike Waltz earlier this week on Iran's efforts to rebuild its military capabilities after the 12-day war in June. According to Al Monitor's Ben Caspit, Binder shared information indicating the damage to Iran's ballistic missiles was not as extensive as previously believed, and that the Islamic Republic has already built back up its capacity. This assessment poses a number of challenges for Israel, and it makes the prospect of another war more likely, and will surely be a topic of discussion between the two leaders. But Iran is not the only issue likely on Netanyahu's mind ahead of the trip. There are concerns in Israel that Trump's plan for Gaza will not lead to an actual disarmament of Hamas. There's additionally daylight between the two countries over the Trump administration's efforts to reduce tensions between Israel and Lebanon over Hezbollah, as well as tensions between Israel and Syria. Finally, the potential sale of the U.S.'s F-35 fighter jet to Turkey and the planned sale of the coveted aircraft to Saudi Arabia both pose major strategic complications for Israel. Ben Caspit is my guest this episode. He takes us through the latest Israeli assessments on Iran's military capabilities, the options on the table regarding Hamas's disarmament, and how Netanyahu might navigate these differences over the F-35s and everything else with Trump. Hope you enjoy. Ben, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Ben, there's a lot to get to. I first want to talk about some very interesting reporting you did this week that Israel believes Iran has already restored its ballistic missile production capacity after the June war. How does this assessment of the damage done to Iran's ballistic missiles capability affect the Israeli calculation when it comes to Iran? And what are some of the possible outcomes resulting from this assessment?
Yes, this is a kind of a surprise in Israeli eyes because the initial thought in Israel after the 12 days war against Iran was that we were able, with the American support, of course, to cause a lot of damage, a strategic damage to the nuclear facilities, and to almost totally destroyed the capability of manufacturing ballistic missiles. But it was wrong. And the Iranians managed to somehow build their abilities, get the very special machines you have to keep in order to produce ballistic precise missiles. And right now, they're actually manufacturing the ballistic missiles in a very close pace to what they were able to do before. And they brought them, formally, I heard about 2,000 missiles right now, but I think, according to Israeli intelligence, the number is lower, but not much lower. And this is, in Israeli national security eyes, a strategic threat, an existential threat, not less from the nuclear issue, because we saw during this war what can one ballistic missile cause, what damage can one ballistic missile cause. By the way, after all the rehabilitation and reconstruction in Israel, the total numbers were that the average damage per one ballistic missile that hit Israel was 300 million shekels. So if you have 2,000, you can cause a lot of damage in Israel, and this is a thing that no Israeli government will be willing to accept. So the bottom line is that everyone in Israel knows that there is no question we will have another round against Iran. The only question is when. Will it happen before Israeli election next year? Or it will have to be delayed to after the Israeli election around the end of 2026 and 2027. And of course, the number one answer, the only one that can answer this question is President Trump, because without the American support Israel, I don't think Israel will launch another attack on Iran.
Just as a quick follow-up, what do you think is more likely, like before the election or after? I mean, could Israel really wait till after the election, or is it more imminent than that?
It's a very tricky question. First of all, the first question is when will be the Israeli election? The original date is October or November 2026, but there is a chance, and not a slim chance, that it will be earlier around June. If you're going to election in June, so the chances to see another strike in Iran are not very high. Although we have history in Israel when Prime Minister Menachem Begin launched a strike against an Iraqi nuclear reactor before the election in Israel. This was his way to win the election, although there was a consensus that Israel have to destroy a nuclear reactor in the hands of Saddam Hussein. So you can never rule it out totally, but if the election in Israel will be in mid-2026, I guess that we will have to wait for after the election. And it's also depend on the pace of the Iranians manufacturing, what kind of intel we will get before. Is the IDF and the Israeli Air Force totally ready? Talking about refueling in the sky, F-35s, etc. But no one think that we will be able to just let Iran gather and produce their ultimate goal of 10,000 ballistic missiles. This is a lot more dangerous than a nuclear bomb.
Shifting to Gaza, there's been a lot of talk of phase two of Trump's plan, but Hamas hasn't been clear about giving up its weapons. In your view, what does Israel expect to happen with the Hamas disarmament? Is a handover of weapons, even a partial one, at all realistic?
In a coincidence, I spent yesterday touring the Gaza Strip on the green side, the Israeli side of the strip is where the IDF is acting between Israel and the yellow line. So I saw everything that's going on there, and I also had a chat with General Yaniv Assor, the commander of the Southern Command. And in his eyes, and the IDF's eyes, and I guess the common Israeli eyes, Hamas will have to just to bring or to surrender all the Kalashnikovs, the personal weapons of the terrorists of Hamas. But in the same paragraph, I say no. Everybody knows it will not happen. In the Middle East, no one gives away his weapon if he doesn't want to get killed 1 minute after. Hamas in Gaza Strip has many enemies, many families that worked or still working with Israel, many civilians or groups that don't like Hamas and blame Hamas in what happened to Gaza. So I don't see a scenario or a picture when you see a line of 20, 30,000 Hamas terrorists just standing in line to give away their weapons. It will not happen. It never happened in the Middle East since Israel was established. What can be done is maybe get rid of the 700 or 800 rockets they still possess. They don't have any armory, any tanks, anything like this. So We're talking actually about rockets, about tunnels. We can negotiate Hamas blowing away or blowing up the remaining tunnels in the eastern strip where Hamas stays. But the only force that can disarm the Kalashnikovs from Hamas is the IDF. And right now, the American president doesn't want to hear anything but going and advancing to the second phase of the ceasefire and the agreement, and this is what is going to happen. Maybe the solution will be talking about a new schedule. If you listen to Hamas, Hamas say, yes, we said we will disarm, but only when a Palestinian state will be established, and then we will give away our weapons to the Palestinian state. But we can also always say, listen, the deadline to finish collecting all the weapons will be the end of 2027, and the special international force will be in charge of it. And just take the problem and put it away for another year or two. And then the Turks, the 2,000 Turk soldiers that are supposed to get in the strip and keep law and order, we have to deal with it, and the conclusion will be the same.
And President Trump has been making a peace push, not just for Gaza, as we discussed, but also Lebanon and Syria. What are some of the biggest issues Netanyahu has with Trump's vision for these three places, and how does Israel plan to deal with these disagreements?
Yes, I thought until a few days ago that the silent deal between Trump and Netanyahu is Trump will give us Lebanon, and Bibi will be more flexible in Gaza and Syria. What I meant in give us Lebanon is let Israel go on forcing the ceasefire and hitting every target of Hezbollah, every piece of intelligence that we get when we see Hezbollah trying to regroup, to reconstruct, to move weapons, to dig tunnels. And this is what the IDF is doing in Lebanon since the ceasefire. I think more than 350 Hezbollah terrorists were killed. But now we see that the American administration is pushing Israel not because the original plan in Israel was to go to another round, not an all-out war like we had before, but a small round of hostilities, 3, 4, 5 days of hitting hard, maybe also with ground operations, targets in Hezbollah, in order to convince them that we are meaning business and Israel is not going to just look on the other side when Hezbollah is trying to rebuild his monster of terror on our fence. But I think under the pressure of Ambassador Tom Barak and others in the administration, the Trump administration now wants more time before we will have the green light to act again in Lebanon. Syria and Gaza are different. In Gaza, this is the Trump courtyard, this is a Trump game, and everything that is happening in Gaza is under American control. We have this base in Kiryat Gat, we have American drones above Gaza. The IDF is operating between the yellow line and the international border, but everyone is waiting for Netanyahu-Trump meeting in the end of this month in Mar-a-Lago to see when exactly the order for the IDF to move and to start going back to the regional borders will be given from Washington. So, and this is very difficult for Netanyahu because he said more than once, he said over and over again, total victory means no Hamas in Gaza. And Hamas is in Gaza right now, controlling all the population, regrouping, rearming. They have around 30,000 terrorists right now with Kalashnikovs. They have a lot of money because all the humanitarian support and aid that Israel is bringing in is controlled by Hamas, and he gets a lot of money for it. So we don't see nothing like how we describe the total victory. And the sad thing is that Netanyahu cannot say anything about it to Trump. Syria is more simple. In Syria, Trump wants Israel and Syria to sign a security agreement. It is not a peace treaty, not a normalization, because Israel is not going to get give away the Golan Heights. But there are many obstacles for before signing this treaty, this agreement, because President Ashara wants Israel to evacuate 4 or 5 posts that we have on Syrian soil, and also Syrian side of the Mount Hermon. And this will be very difficult for us because this very, very large area between the border and Damascus has a lot of militants, a lot of terrorists that the Syrian regime cannot control, and we cannot afford leaving the place and hoping that something good will happen in it. And again, like we said before, it all depends in President Trump. So you see, we have many, many issues where the president and the prime minister are not seeing eye to eye, not standing on the same page. And this is the reason the meeting or the summit in Florida in the next few weeks will be so crucial.
I want to conclude with something you're reporting on that is related to all this, which is the issue of the F-35 fighter jets. How big of a problem is it, in Israel's view, if Turkey and also if Saudi Arabia get their hands on these fighters?
This is a major problem, and if you'll ask the head of the Israeli Air Force or the chief of staff or even Netanyahu and Israel Katz, Minister of Defense, it's crucial because Israel having F-35s, the only power in the Middle East that possess these fighter jets, is a huge game changer. It enabled Israel to surprise Iran, to act above Tehran without the Iranians can even retaliate. It gives you a lot of advantage against your enemies. This airplane is so sophisticated, it doesn't need any air control. You get into the cockpit, you press on, and you see all the Middle East, you see everyone that's flying towards you. And even imagining Erdogan possessing a few dozens of these airplanes after he threatened Israel in the last 2 years, even to invade Israel, he said everything. This is a disaster in Israeli eyes. And I also reported today in Al Monitor that Netanyahu himself met on December 1st one of the senior officials of Lockheed Martin, a guy named Frank St. John. I think he tried to convince Netanyahu that the others, the Saudis and the Turks, will not get the same version of F-35 as Israel. But this is not good enough because being stealth and having all this aeronautics in the plane is a game changer, and it will be very difficult for Israel to accept it and to swallow it and to digest it. After we have this MQE, military qualitative advantage rule from 2008 in the American Congress that forbids letting one of Israel enemies tools to hurt Israel or Israel deterrence. So this will be a major issue that will be discussed between Netanyahu's staff and the Trump administration, and we have to keep our eyes on it.
Ben, thanks a lot for all your insights on these issues, and we look forward to more of your reporting.
Thank you, Adam. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.